Tanager Place and the Meraki Institute of Learning proudly present Together We Rise, a series on capturing the journeys of resilience and well-being based on the Rise, Wellness, and Resilience framework. For those of you who are joining us today for the first time, this show is a series digging deep into the concept of resilience. In this interview series, we are talking to those in the corridor who have exhibited courage and strength in the face of hardship. These individuals are here with us to share their personal story of resilience. We hope this series will inspire hope and possibility in others. Because when we call on our courage and show up in the midst of struggle, we offer a bright place and to not give up. Together we can rise with the means to manage, restore, and grow.
Welcome, Alejandro. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Alejandro, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Super happy to be here with you and participate in this very important, opportunity to kind of tell my story a little bit as well too. But I consider myself a very blessed and fortunate individual. I am honored and privileged to be the executive director of YPN, which was formerly Young Parents Network. So every day I have the opportunity to work with just some amazing people that I'm surrounded with that are really in it for the right reason, and that's really powerful to see on a daily basis. I often tell people when I walk into work every day, I don't really see it as work, which is just a very empowering feeling, and that it's more of a calling, right? It's bigger than me, than all of us, and then I think it's just a collective responsibility we all have to empower families and to really improve society. But yeah, through my professional journey has taken me, I first started as an international marketing researcher here in Cedar Rapids for a local firm. Then I transitioned to my alma mater, so I went back to Loras College in Dubuque, and I was a head tennis men's and women's tennis coach, and then also international recruiter as well. So I got to work with folks from all over the world, which I've always loved. And then I transitioned to be the director of intercultural affairs for the institution as well too. So in that capacity, again, working with folks of all different backgrounds, and got to know people kind of on the deep level, just how similar we all are, and that sort of thing too. But then we moved back to Cedar Rapids after that. So we've lived in small communities and little larger communities as well too. Then I went into the staffing industry as well. Okay. So I did that for about 7 years. Super diverse community that we work with there as well. And then now I'm executive director of YPN as well. So
one of the patterns that I see through that is this deep desire to work with a variety of cultures and backgrounds. And you and I got a chance to connect before this interview about your life story and your journey. And one that I would say throughout was filled with struggle and some adversity and even some trauma, but one that also allowed you to cultivate this essence of wellness and resilience and this beautiful part of the other half of the narrative. Tell us, Alejandro, a little bit about that journey and story.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because obviously that's helped shape who I am today in many respects. And I will just start out by saying that I know I'm very fortunate and blessed to have had the experiences that I've had, right? I mean, even though some of them have been very challenging and trying, there's always been a support network around me, and that I know not everybody has. So that's why it's incumbent about, from all of us to be that support for other people. So essentially, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Lima, Peru, South America. Throughout that experience, again, surrounded by a super loving family, I still remember a lot of the great things about growing up there. So super close to my grandmother. She was, always wanted to make sure that we were eating all the time. And had a little bit of the Greek background too, so she was very boisterous and, very opinionated, but loved her to death. And then my extended family the same, and we were super close, right? So obviously during that time, though, the country was going through a little bit of upheaval, meaning that the political and economic situation was just very bad. In particular, there was a terrorist group by the name of the Shining Path that was essentially very anti-government, anti-Western, meaning that they were anti-American. And at that point, my father and my uncle were both working for American companies. My dad for Texaco, and then my uncle for Chrysler, who had a plant there as well. So obviously, I vividly remember, them blowing buildings up during that time. I remember, the power going out, having to light candles and that sort of thing. But probably the most thing that struck me the most is just seeing how deadly of tactics they were using during that time. So as an example, I still remember at 10 years old seeing bodies laying in the street covered by newspaper. So that's always been ingrained in my mind, seeing that as well too. So obviously when I was 10, my folks made the very difficult decision. And my mom's originally from Cedar Rapids, so that's how the whole relation. My dad came here to study, to go to college, and that's how they met. Sure. But I still vividly remember the day I left, and having to say goodbye to all the family that I have grown up with to that point. To my grandmother, who I was super close to, even to my dog. I still remember hugging my dog, and I still to this day know that he had a tear. I still remember that as well too. But it's difficult. So that's why, as you mentioned, I've always had that love for folks that come from very difficult situations to look for a better life, right? And some come, whether documented or undocumented, essentially that there's still that, yearning for better for your family, for protection, for, stability. It's just amazing to see that, those stories. But so that, in a nutshell, is kind of that experience that really has helped me grow in many respects as well, right?
Tell me a little bit, Alejandro, then, because then at 10 years old, the significant loss to family that was staying back while you moved here, the adjustment of moving then to westernized culture, what was that like for you?
So I still remember, like the first day of school, I remember the teacher introducing me, and she kind of gave a heads up. We have this little boy coming from a different country, and and at that point I had kind of an accent too. Sure. And my mom did a great job in Peru of teaching us English, and in the schools it's just required to teach English as well too. So, but I still had a little bit of a thicker accent and that sort of thing too. But I still remember that. But more, the thing that really stuck with me, and typically I've never really opened up about this as much. So what a great way to do it on camera in front of everybody. But the thing that really I've had to work through is the anxiety that a lot of what I saw in Peru stuck with me. Yeah. So I'll give you, just some examples as well. So if my mom, was coming to pick me up at school and she was late, immediately thought the worst case scenario, right? So I immediately thought, oh my gosh, she got in a car accident, she died on the way, and those are things that I've had to this day, I'm still working through those. So even walking into the building today, I already know where the exits are. Yeah. Because, again, in my mind, what if the building, something happens, right? So it's just those things that have always stuck with me, and it's taken a lot to work through, right? It's a continual struggle, to work through all those, and that anxiety has really always stuck with me. Yeah. So very often, I'm always asking the what if questions. What if this happens, or what if that happened? I still remember, growing up, if I lost sight of my younger brother, I would go into a panic because I thought somebody had taken him and that sort of thing as well. So again, a lot we can trace back, I think, to growing up and having that in the back of my mind as, things that we struggled with. But yeah.
One of the things that it makes me think about is, we've talked a lot in this interview series about the RISE Wellness and Resilience framework, because that framework really helps give us a lens in the way that we see adversity and struggle, but also the way that we see resilience and wellness. And we talk often within the R part, the relationship part, is that our life experiences shape who we are. They shape the way we see ourselves, the way we see others, the way we see the world around us. I am guessing that many of your experiences have shaped who you are, but then also have given you this space and this ability to then also be curious about other people's experiences. And I have heard you talk about that and how that has given you some level of meaning and purpose in life, and this desire for connection and belonging, and offering that to others who have themselves been through hard experiences, and giving people grace and kindness and love. Tell me a little bit about how that manifested throughout your life and how that was cultivated.
So one thing that obviously I think is important to realize is that none of us are perfect, number one, and that we've all, even though you may encounter somebody who seems to be completely put together, or they have, this huge bank account and that sort of thing, we all have our own struggles. That's one thing that I've always kind of known, but just some of us just keep it in, much like I've done for most of my life. But I know that's not healthy, right? So I think one of the things that it's really helped with me, Tanya, is showing the empathy piece. And that, obviously we can never know for certain, 100% know what somebody's going through. But if you yourself have gone through those challenges, there's some similarity in, some of the emotions that you might be feeling, whereby then you can offer some of that support to somebody. So much of that, though, is much like we're doing right now, through conversation, through deep conversation, getting to know somebody at that deep level. I don't think we do that often enough. And I think if we do that more so, there's so much that would be improved just about not only that relationship, but just society in general, right? Because there's so many assumptions we make sometimes. And we see that with what we do, in our profession as well, too. Well, they shouldn't have gotten pregnant, or, X, Y, and Z. When you have to look at first of all, nobody has, we don't have a choice into what we're born into, right? So what are we doing to help collectively uplift and empower families and educate each other as well through our own experiences to improve your situation as well, too? I thrive off of learning about other people because it makes me, I think, a better person. And every situation, any interaction that I ever have with somebody is a learning moment for me. And I kind of look at it that way, as what did I learn from that interaction? And what may I be able to offer that person to help them kind of cope with their difficulty and challenge and that sort of thing as well, too. So I have a lot of growing to do. I know that I'm not perfect. There's folks out there that have gone through much worse and much more intense, stories. But we all have that humanity in common. We can't lose sight of that.
So much of what I love hearing you talk about is what, for us in the RISE framework, we talk about as social emotional development. This ability to cultivate our own awareness of self and this awareness of others and perspective taking. And, we could go on and on, assuming positive intent and how to stay regulated or how to manage our affect so that we can approach difficulty in a way that allows us to be centered or grounded, which is so hard, especially when our triggers come up and our values are compromised or challenged. How have you, throughout your journey, cultivated your own emotional intelligence?
So I think it's been interesting because I think folks that go through similar experiences have a connection, right? There's a connection that you feel with somebody. So that's why I've always been drawn to like the immigrant and refugee community, is that I think I'm able to relate to those populations because there's similarities of what we've been through, right? Certainly not to the full extent, as an example with the Afghan community that's moving in. I mean, what they have seen and gone through, and as well with the African community, is just, those are things that you wouldn't want anybody to go through, right? But I think those experiences and that connection, it's almost like we get each other, right? There's just something there where those interactions, they know where I'm coming from and I know where they're coming from. So it's through those experiences, and I would also say through also challenging yourself to experience new things. So as an example, if you would like to get to know the stories of folks, come to Thursday night at YPN, where you can sit in the African, moms group and kind of hear about some of the things that they're going through. Put yourself in situations that may be uncomfortable, but man, they are so incredibly enriching, and they teach you so much just about humanity. As I told you differently, all of my previously, all of the interactions that I've ever had with people from, it doesn't really matter from where, we all want to be heard, we all want to be felt like we matter, and we all want to be loved. That's universal. So the more we can understand that and put ourselves in situations where we want to understand the other side, it's just right now, as we all know, with how political everything is and one-sided, and we're not just open to learning about different perspectives. Just imagine how much change there would be, understanding, compassion there would be if we all took that time to get to know one another.
Were there core relationships in your life that really helped you center yourself on those values?
I think obviously my background kind of lends itself a little bit to that, as well. My folks, my parents have always been super, supportive as well. But more so, I think it's just identifying the people that are there to help you. And this is what I would tell folks as well too, is that there's always people out there that really want to be part of your journey, your healing journey. And don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate the power other people have to really help you in that. And I've just been fortunate enough, especially in my role, and even in all the different roles that I've had professionally, there's always certain people, whether it was the president of Loras where I worked, or the vice president of student affairs that I also was very close to, and all the different staff. But probably the most powerful connections that I had were with the actual students, right? Because you get to know what they had gone through. They left their, places. Like we had Nepalese students that just left and wouldn't even go back home the 4 years that they were at Loras to visit because they couldn't, in many respects, they couldn't do it. But it's through all those connections, and each time I learned something valuable for them. And I still, maintain in contact as well too. So I've also identified certain individuals here that have also helped as well too, because without that support, it's very difficult for you to challenge yourself to share, to get out some of that stuff that's really been, kind of building up, and it's just not a healthy way to get through a lot of that challenge.
Now, Alejandro, I've heard you talk about kind of this struggle with hypervigilance, right, and some anxiety due to some of your experiences. How have you cultivated kind of healing around that? And healing doesn't mean there's an end to it. It means living every day with that in a way that allows you to optimize daily functioning and joy and positivity and adaptiveness in relationships. What are some things you've done for yourself?
So that is certainly a work in progress. As you mentioned, I don't know when, if there's an end point, because it's continual, and you just have to be aware of yourself and in many respects change your mindset. That's not an easy thing to do, but easier said than done, right? Yeah. Because when something's been kind of ingrained, it's kind of like a muscle. You kind of have to work it out for it to be stronger and that sort of thing. It's the same thing with your brain. So once those things are ingrained, it's difficult to change them. So a lot of the things that I've been working on with certain individuals too, I actually met with her today, a coach, and we've been kind of talking about these sorts of things, is identifying it, when it's happening, and when it's happening, asking yourself, is what you're thinking real? How real is it, right? Or is it something that could potentially happen? And what's the likelihood of that potentially happening? So a lot of it is self-talk and kind of working through that. Not an easy thing to do, obviously, because you have to catch yourself and then you have to kind of shift your mindset as well, too. But anything, and we talk about wellness things that help individuals as well, too. So one of the things that I've started to to do in the mornings is, like meditation and mindfulness. I think that's certainly something that's helped. You mentioned earlier the grounding piece, and that kind of helps to ground yourself a little bit as well. More than anything, though, it's just getting it out. Yeah. Having that conversation with somebody to kind of work through some of those exercises. And I think that probably is the most profound way that I have found, is just sharing it, and not being, self-conscious about it. And, one of the things, and obviously I think this COVID thing has kind of taught us also, is the fragility of life, right? And really just appreciating the small things and relate, whether it's relationships or just the other blessings and things that are in your life that you appreciate. So it's really just the way that you look at things is a little bit different, but it's a work in progress.
In the RISE framework, the E is enhancements, and the enhancements is the interconnection of our mind, body, spirit. And so when you talk about this, how do you treat your soul? How do you treat your heart? How do you treat your body? How do you treat your brain? Because there's this interconnection between all of it. And so our sleep impacts us, the way we eat, the way we exercise, our thoughts, One of the things that you said that I want to go back to before we wrap up this interview is this idea of control. You said that you talk to someone who helps kind of coach and be aware of your thoughts and how you're controlling what you're saying in your inner dialogue. One of the biggest protective factors with resilience is this felt sense of control. And I think so much of the adversity and the things you saw in Peru is that you didn't have a felt sense of control, right? So then when your mom doesn't show up or is a little late, your mind goes to worst case scenario because your brain is trying to find an element of control. But oftentimes what we do in westernized culture is when people are struggling, we take away from them rather than giving them this element of control and autonomy and believing in their sense of efficacy. But so much of what you do at YPN and so much of the good work is giving empowerment back to people. Tell me about that.
So that's one thing, one of the things, I often say that, it takes all of us, it takes that collective responsibility to really empower one another, right? It's very difficult to do anything on your own. And, oftentimes, there's so many difficult situations where people feel stuck, and we see that with a lot of the participants that we work with, right? It's really a lack of hope. Yeah. And that is such a powerful and just, it's heartbreaking in all honesty. When we see a lot of the kids and we look into their eyes and we see all that potential, but we know the difficult situations that they're living in, it's incumbent upon all of us to really help that situation and that family and that child thrive in the community, and help the parents or the guardians as much as we can, right? It really does. It takes all of us to really help each other, and it's such a powerful thing to see when you see it in action. And I often tell, and we hear it often too, but to never underestimate the power we all have individually to make that impact on another person. Right? Sometimes it's just the smallest act that may change a life completely around. And we've seen it in action, right? And don't be bashful. Don't think, I would never be able to do that. No, yes you can, right? Yes you can. And that's one thing that we're doing this mentorship program with our Latino youth at Harding Middle School as well too. But that's one thing that I really encourage them and I had them write it down, so then they put it up in their locker, is yes, you can. Don't just focus on the tough experiences or maybe the negative interactions you may have with somebody and generalize it to the entire population, right? Look for individuals that are there, and know that none of us are perfect, that we all have struggles regardless of who you are, and that we're all here for one another. Just find those people. We're here.
I have no doubt so much of your journey has allowed you to arrive here today and give back to this world and to give meaning and purpose to your calling on the universe. And so very blessed we are to have your soul here. Its influence is one that certainly has a ripple effect. And so I appreciate so much your story, your willingness to share it, the journey you've taken to cultivate different elements, continuing to approach every day as an opportunity to continue to heal and to learn and to grow. Any last words for us, Alejandro? Any last piece of advice for those who are listening?
So one of the things that I would certainly tell people is I always want them to know that they're not alone. And that's one thing that I think is so powerful, to know that there's really people out there. And I say this 100% passionately and humbly, knowing that there's people out there that do care, right? So don't only focus on the negative, maybe interactions that you've had with other people. Focus on the positive that's out there that may not have been discovered yet, but is out there. Look for them, because there's people out there that truly want to help you. And certainly I would be one of those people that would be there for individuals, but know that nobody's perfect. We're all growing, we all have our issues, and that we just have to be there for one another to empower ourselves, to empower each other as well too. So.
Yeah. Alejandro, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much.
Support is out there.
You're okay, just how you are.
The staff members and the people that I met along the way just made me realize that there are genuine people out there that actually just want to help.
Reach out to somebody.
It's okay to literally not be okay.
Have somebody in your corner.
How do you become your best self for others if you're not doing that for yourself first?
I was rescued.
It will get better. No matter how bad it is. It won't get perfect, it won't go away, but it will get better.
Are you being true to yourself? Is it worth betraying who you are to fit into a box that somebody else has created?
Try to learn as much as you can. Give yourself the knowledge to make the best choice that you can.
It does take a certain level of courage to admit that you have a problem, to ask for help, and then to see it through.
We'll all continue to rise together.
People struggle sometimes. That's okay.
And I had people that showed up for me when I didn't expect it. And I have people who showed up for me at times in my life, and now they're not a part of my life. And that's okay too.
I kind of like to think of it as like some butterfly effect.
You have to find what makes you happy.
I'm here for a reason, and my future self is going to be so thankful that I didn't throw in the towel because it got tough.
I am who I am, but I will never be able to be the part of somebody else.
To keep it all inside is not good. It's just going to chew you up on the inside.
Life choices I made may be the reason that I'm having a harder time, and not feeling shame in that.
No matter the challenges you and your family face, Tanager Place is here for you. We'll meet you wherever you are in your journey, and together define a path to reach your goals. Together we rise. Tanager Place.
Thank you again for joining us today and for spending time with us. We hope today's segment offered hope and healing. Today's series brought to you by Tanager Place and the Meraki Institute of Learning. For more information, please visit our website